What if I told you that before the pyramids were built, before Stonehenge stood on the plains of England, before humans even learned to farm their first crops, hunter-gatherers, people we think of as wandering in small bands, following herds, gathering wild plants, organized themselves by the hundreds to build a temple, not just any temple, a massive, sophisticated complex of carved limestone pillars, each weighing up to 20 tons, arranged in perfect circles, decorated with intricate sculptures of animals that stalk through your nightmares. And then, after centuries of use, communities of workers buried it, deliberately, carefully, completely. For 11,000 years, it stayed hidden beneath a hill in Turkey, waiting. In 1994, archaeologists uncovered it, and what they found challenged everything we thought we knew about the beginning of human civilization. This isn't a legend. This isn't speculation. This is Göbekli Tepe. And according to every timeline we've ever taught, according to every theory about how civilization develops, it shouldn't exist. The year was 1994. German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt was conducting a survey in southeastern Turkey, near the city of Şanlıurfa. He was looking at a hill, an artificial-looking mound that locals called Potbelly Hill, Göbekli Tepe in Turkish. Previous surveys in the 1960s had dismissed the site as nothing more than a medieval cemetery. Some old graves, nothing interesting. Move on. But Klaus Schmidt saw something others had missed. Scattered across the surface of the hill were fragments of worked limestone, not natural rock, shaped, carved, and a lot of it. He began to dig test trenches, and within days his team hit something that made them stop and stare. A massive stone pillar, T-shaped, standing upright. Then another, and another. These weren't grave markers. These were something else entirely, something much older. Something monumental. Schmidt realized what he was looking at, and he dedicated the rest of his life to uncovering it. What emerged from that hill over the next 2 decades would rewrite textbooks. Göbekli Tepe isn't a cemetery. It's a complex of massive stone temples, multiple circular enclosures, each surrounded by enormous T-shaped pillars carved from solid limestone. The pillars range from 3 to 6 meters tall, about 10 to 20 feet. Some weigh up to 20 tons. That's roughly the weight of 3 full-size elephants, or a loaded dump truck. And they're not blank stones. They're covered in carvings, foxes, serpents, scorpions, wild boars, vultures, gazelles, lions, spiders. Not crude stick figures. Detailed 3-dimensional reliefs. The animals seem to move across the stone, predators and prey frozen in limestone. Some pillars show human-like figures, stylized, abstract forms with arms but no faces. Others show symbols we don't understand, geometric patterns, circles, crescents, H-shapes. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. Teams of workers quarried the pillars from bedrock half a kilometer away, shaped them with precision, transported them to the hilltop, and erected them in carefully planned circles. And here's where it gets strange. There's no evidence of permanent habitation at Göbekli Tepe. No houses, no cooking hearths, no trash pits from daily life. This wasn't a village. It was a destination, a place groups of people came to for a specific purpose, then left. But who were these people? And more importantly, when did they build this? Klaus Schmidt's team used multiple dating methods: radiocarbon dating of organic materials, stratigraphy, tool analysis. The results were consistent and impossible. Göbekli Tepe was built around 9500 BCE. That's approximately 11,500 years ago. Let me put that in perspective. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built around 2500 BCE, Göbekli Tepe is 7,000 years older. Stonehenge, built around 3000 BCE, Göbekli Tepe is 6,500 years older. The invention of writing? Around 3200 BCE, Göbekli Tepe predates writing by over 6,000 years. But here's the real problem, the truly impossible part. Göbekli Tepe was built before the agricultural revolution. Let me explain why that's a problem. For over a century, we've taught a very clear sequence of human development. It goes like this. First, humans were hunter-gatherers, small nomadic groups, following herds, gathering wild plants, moving constantly. Then, around 10,000 years ago, some groups figured out agriculture. They domesticated wheat and barley. They started farming. Farming meant staying in one place. Permanent settlements, villages. Villages grew into towns, towns into cities. Cities needed organization, leadership, specialization, division of labor. And that surplus of food and organization allowed for monumental architecture, temples, palaces, pyramids. That's the timeline. That's what every archaeology textbook teaches. Göbekli Tepe breaks that timeline because Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers. There's no evidence of domesticated plants at the site. No cultivated crops. The people who built it were still hunting wild animals and gathering wild grains. They hadn't invented farming yet, and yet somehow these supposedly primitive hunter-gatherer communities organized themselves to quarry, carve, transport, and erect 20-ton stone pillars. They created a site that would have required hundreds, possibly thousands of people working in coordination over generations. They developed sophisticated artistic traditions, symbolic language, architectural planning. They did all of this without agriculture, without permanent villages, without any of the things we thought were prerequisites for monumental construction. How is that possible? Let's talk about the logistics, because the more you look at Göbekli Tepe, the more questions emerge. First, the quarrying. The pillars were carved directly out of bedrock at a limestone quarry about 500 meters from the main site. Teams of workers used stone tools, flint hammers and picks to cut channels around each pillar, slowly separating it from the parent rock. We know they used stone tools because we found them, thousands of flint implements scattered across the site. But here's the thing. Carving a 6-meter-tall pillar weighing 20 tons using only stone tools would take months, maybe a year, per pillar. And there are over 200 pillars at Göbekli Tepe, across multiple enclosures, built over centuries. That's an absolutely staggering investment of time and labor for a society without agriculture. Second, the transport. Once carved, each pillar had to be moved 500 meters uphill, 20 tons, without wheels. Without draft animals, horses and oxen weren't domesticated yet. Modern engineers estimate it would take at least 500 people pulling on ropes to move one pillar, maybe more. Where did those 500 people come from? Hunter-gatherer groups typically numbered 20 to 50 individuals. You'd need to coordinate multiple bands, feed them all, house them temporarily, organize the massive collective effort. That requires social structures we didn't think existed yet. Leadership, planning, communication networks across different groups, things we didn't think hunter-gatherers had. Third, the erection. Getting a 20-ton pillar upright without modern equipment is no small feat. It requires ramps, leverage, counterweights, precise coordination among dozens of workers. And these construction teams didn't just stand the pillars up, they positioned them in perfect circles, specific orientations, some aligned to astronomical features. This wasn't random. It was planned, designed, executed with precision by organized groups working from a common blueprint. Fourth, the carvings. The animal reliefs aren't crude. They're sophisticated three-dimensional sculptures. The artists understood perspective, composition, anatomy. They depicted specific species with accurate details, not generic animals. You can identify the species: vultures with characteristic beaks, foxes with bushy tails, serpents with scaled skin. This points to specialized artisans, master craftsmen training apprentices, artistic traditions passed down through generations, standards, quality control, a craft guild, essentially, operating 11,000 years ago. All of this points to something archaeologists didn't think existed: social hierarchy. Long-term planning coordinated across multiple generations. Large-scale cooperation among hunter-gatherer bands that supposedly lived in isolation. And here's the strangest part. After all that effort, after generations of building and maintaining these temples, communities deliberately buried them. Around 8500 BCE, about 1,000 years after Göbekli Tepe's construction began, something changed. The site was deliberately buried, not abandoned, not destroyed by enemies, not collapsed by earthquake. Buried, intentionally, carefully, by organized groups of workers. They filled the enclosures with debris, limestone fragments, broken tools, animal bones. They covered the pillars, the carvings, the entire complex. It would have taken almost as much coordinated effort to bury the site as it took to build it. Why would communities invest so much labor to hide what they'd spent generations creating? We don't know, but we can speculate based on the evidence. Preservation by intent. Maybe the builders knew their way of life was ending. They buried Göbekli Tepe not to destroy it, but to preserve it, to protect it from whatever came next. A time capsule, a message to the future from communities that understood change was coming. But what we do know is this: the burial worked. For 11,000 years, Göbekli Tepe remained hidden, undisturbed, waiting beneath a hill in Turkey for archaeologists to find it again. And when we did find it, we had to confront an uncomfortable truth. We were wrong about the past. Göbekli Tepe forces us to rethink the story of civilization. For a century, we believed the sequence was clear. Agriculture led to villages, villages led to cities, cities led to temples. Food surplus enabled monumental architecture. But Göbekli Tepe suggests the opposite might be true. Think about it. If you're going to bring together hundreds of people regularly to build and maintain a temple complex, you need to feed them all. Hunter-gatherers can feed small groups by moving around, but large gatherings of multiple bands require a reliable food source, something predictable, storable, cultivated grains. Some archaeologists now believe Göbekli Tepe might have been the catalyst for agriculture in the region. Groups came to the temple complex. They stayed for extended periods. They needed food, so communities began experimenting with cultivating wild wheat and barley nearby. Over time, that experimentation led to domestication, to farming, to permanent settlements, symbolic thinking, artistic traditions spanning generations. They could organize large-scale projects, coordinate across different groups, plan for the future, work collectively toward shared goals. They weren't waiting for agriculture to unlock their potential. They already had the potential. Agriculture was just one application of it. But Göbekli Tepe raises another question, a more unsettling one. If hunter-gatherer societies in 9,500 BCE could build something this sophisticated, what else did they build that we haven't found? Göbekli Tepe survived because communities buried it, protected it. But how many other sites weren't buried? How many were built of wood that rotted, or stone that was later reused by other civilizations for different buildings? How much of our distant past has vanished without a trace? And here's the thing that should keep archaeologists up at night. We've only excavated about 5% of Göbekli Tepe. 5%. The rest, 95% of the site, is still buried, waiting. Ground-penetrating radar shows there are at least 20 more enclosures underground. Maybe more. Who knows what archaeological teams will find when they excavate them? New carvings, new symbols, new mysteries about how these hunter-gatherer societies organized themselves. And Göbekli Tepe isn't unique anymore. In the years since its discovery, archaeologists have found similar sites across the region: Karahan Tepe, Harbetsuvan Tepesi, Sefer Tepe, all dating to roughly the same period, all showing similar architectural styles, all built by hunter-gatherer communities. Göbekli Tepe wasn't an isolated anomaly. It was part of a broader culture, a network of organized societies building monumental temples across what is now Turkey. Societies we never knew existed. And it makes you wonder, what else don't we know? So what's the final lesson of Göbekli Tepe? It's not that ancient aliens helped us. It's not that there was some lost advanced civilization with magical technology. The lesson is simpler and more profound. Our ancestors were brilliant, not because they had help from outside, but because they were human, creative, curious, capable of extraordinary cooperation. Communities looked at a hill and imagined a temple. They looked at limestone and saw pillars waiting to be carved. They organized themselves across different bands, solved engineering problems together, and created art that still moves us 11,000 years later. And they did it all with stone tools and collective determination. We keep underestimating the past. We assume that older means simpler, more primitive, less capable of complex social organization. Göbekli Tepe proves us wrong. It reminds us that human ingenuity doesn't have an expiration date, that innovation and social complexity aren't modern inventions, that every generation, no matter how far back you go, was made up of people just as smart, just as creative, just as capable of working together as we are. They just had different tools, different challenges, different questions to answer. And maybe, just maybe, Göbekli Tepe teaches us humility. Because if we were wrong about when organized societies built temples, what else are we wrong about? How many other sites are buried beneath hills, waiting for archaeological teams to discover them? How many other stories have we lost? How much of the past remains a mystery? Not because it was never interesting, but because we haven't looked carefully enough. Göbekli Tepe is a reminder that history isn't finished. The past still has secrets to reveal. And every time archaeologists dig a little deeper, they find something that changes the story. Maybe that's the real mystery. Not what happened 11,000 years ago, but what we'll discover next. Let me know in the comments. What do you think motivated these hunter-gatherer communities to build Göbekli Tepe? And what do you think archaeological teams will find in the 95% that's still buried? See you in the next archive.